Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with a completely different thing than normal as a make-up for the fact that I had no video on Sunday. There was nothing to post. But it came up spur of the moment today, and I felt like pushing it out. You like this? Let me know in the comments below, and I can do more stuff like this. Maybe. So, the general thing I want to get on here is, I touched on this a couple weeks ago. Well, a little more than a week. On Twitter about there's this common factoid that people repeat around. You see it a lot in political punditry, particularly I find these days among people generally of the left. I don't think it is a left-wing thing, but I normally only see left-wingers say it these days, though I think 5-10 years ago it was just a common thing for anyone to say. And that is that people get more conservative as they age. And not as an observation, like a descriptive statement of what happens. This was a normative claim. That is, aging makes people more conservative. Now, this is obviously a wild oversimplification. And it's, in fact, not only is it a wild oversimplification, it is almost an insane oversimplification. It makes so little sense that I am amazed anyone ever says it. What it tells you that it is repeated so frequently is that people don't actually critically analyze points like this. They just repeat it because other pundits, other quote-unquote political scientists, other gurus of politics have repeated this statement before. And thus, they repeat it. Because the core flaw here is the basic claim is that aging makes you more conservative. It is a direct causal claim. Old people are more conservative. Well, there's a couple problems with this. There's no obvious causal link here. Just fundamentally, there is nothing to do with the aging process as biologically defined, or however science or you want to interpret it. However aging works, there's no mechanism in aging in and of itself that would make you change your political views. If you took a person at 17 and put them in a stasis, so nothing in their life changed for 50 years, at 67, they're probably going to be the same person. If everything is the same and nothing changes, there's no reason to believe the mere fact that they have aged has changed anything. Now, one next level version of this claim, which is tries to counter this counter argument, is that it's not the biological process of aging that makes people more conservative. It is the wisdom gained. And you hear quotes like, if you're not a socialist when you're 20, you're, what is the exact quote? You're like a sociopath, and if you're not a conservative, by the time you're 50, you're an idiot, or something like that. I think Winston Churchill's often attributed to that quote, but I don't actually think he said that, but anyways, you see that quote got brought up or similar arguments made. But again, it's extremely reductive. What is wisdom? What is happening that is making you wiser and changing your political beliefs? What? there is no obvious mechanism there, because all wisdom is effectively life experience. But life experience can reinforce your worldview. It can change your worldview, but can also reinforce your worldview. I'll just use a personal example. This is an anecdote, sure, but a personal example. When I was in, what year back is this? 8 years ago, so high school. There was the 2015 Canadian election going on. In 2015, I was going to vote for Trudeau. I could not vote. I just missed the deadline. But I would have voted Liberal in that election. Unsurprisingly, considering 70% of the province did, of Nova Scotia. But that was what I was intending to do. So we could say the age of approximately 18, slightly younger, but effectively 18, I could be considered centrist, maybe center-left even, on a broad scale. But on a specific scale, I was extremely pro-life. Still am. Nothing in the last 8 years has actually changed that. In the converse, the wisdom gained with my age has just reinforced my previous pro-life positions. So the wisdom there has not actually changed my worldview. And maybe you could say 8 years, give or take, is not wisdom. But whatever. You're being picky. Experiencing life gives you more wisdom. You get more wisdom as you age, but it's still wisdom. Conversely, or sort of supporting the theory, though, that wisdom makes you more conservative, I am now more conservative than I was in 2015. In fact, if you follow my Twitter account, I think that's probably painfully obvious. But the thing here, which I think people really miss, and which I'm really trying to hit with this statement here, is yes, wisdom and life events, before this, wisdom of aging can maybe change your political beliefs in general. Things could happen to you that make you think your previous beliefs are wrong, or that old ideas actually work and are good. That can happen 100%. The catch, though, is there is no reason to believe, at least in any study I've seen, or any argument I've heard, that wisdom is exactly leaning conservative. And in fact, if there is data for this, if there is data to show that world experience makes people more conservative, that would lend you to the conclusion that conservative worldviews are superior because everyone, as they age, as they gain more wisdom, adopts a conservative worldview. If that was true, conservative parties would be throwing that study everywhere. It would be in ads all the time. Conservative-minded pundits would be constantly bringing it up. If we could definitively prove that wiser people are more conservative, that would be slam dunk. There would be non-stop barrage of this. There wouldn't be this nebulous idea, well, is this really true? No, we would know 100% because everyone who has the vested interest in pushing their political worldview, politicians, pundits, would push this because it validates them. If we could arguably, definitively say, wisdom makes you wiser, we would not hear wisdom makes you wise, that's a truism. Wisdom makes you more conservative. We would have a never-ending barrage of that. You couldn't go outside and read a newspaper and not be bombarded with that. It'd be such a foundational effect on society. So the fact that we don't see this, we don't see anyone talking about this, there's no reference to any studies on this, and as far as I'm aware, people have studied things like this and haven't found any conclusive results. We can pretty much safely ignore this. Now, there is a derivative of this hypothesis, which is the one I said on Twitter, which I think is generally true, but it is oversimplification massively, which is the hypothesis is basically events in your life make you more conservative. And to show the receipts of the tweet, is it this one? Here we go. So this is sub in a thread, so right here, but this is the sub tweet. This is the sub hypothesis. So basically, paying taxes, gaining more responsibility, marriage, having kids, having grandkids, starting a business, just to name these examples I named in the tweet, make people more conservative. Now, why might that be? Well, the general gist is with them is it's people are gaining responsibility and they're gaining a less atomized worldview. When you are married and you're in a proper marriage, and I could even somewhat say a stable long-term relationship, but your perspective on life isn't what is best for me, it's what's best for us, you and your spouse. When you have kids, you're considering what's the best for my kids. Grandkids, the same idea. You have a business, it's not what's best for me as a person, it's what's best for me, for the company, my business. You have more responsibility like you're a manager at work. It's not what is best for me at the company, what is best for the team. At least a good manager is like that. I'm sure people have had bad managers who don't care about that. But generally speaking, the good managers care what's best for their managees. I don't want to say employees because technically the manager's not employing them, but you know what I mean. Why would increased responsibility make people more conservative? Well, at the very least, in how conservatism in 2023 works, conservatives are not individualists. Now, there's this common refrain and idea that the left in general is collectivist. That's, I don't think, is correct. Now, yes, communists are collectivist, but most people in the left, be it the Trudeaus of the world, the Singhs of the world, or the Stalins of the world, those are your three. If those are your three people, most aren't the Stalins. More people are like the Singhs or like the Trudeaus of the world than they're like the Stalins among the political left wing. In fact, I would say very few people are ideological collectivists. In my view, from what I've seen, from talking to left-wingers, seeing left-wing politicians and campaigns, the left wing is hyper-individualist. They think basically the left-wing progressive mindset is what's best for the individual person, what makes them happiest. We won't get there. What makes them happiest is the best thing for them. This is why, in general terms, progressivism is strongly supporting gender theory, for example. It's not strictly because they necessarily agree with it or they necessarily like it, but it's the underlying philosophical principle that if this makes someone happier, it is good. All it is about is making the individual more happy. At least modern progressivism. Yes, if you look at classical socialism, that is about making the collective happier. But there's very little argument from that in modern left-wing politics. Whereas this is not really a value in general among at least traditional conservative types. The way I would best describe it is the difference is picture a marriage. The left-wing view of marriage is that these are two people who are joining together because they like each other and it's mutually beneficial and it makes them happy. That is why left-wingers overwhelmingly support no-fault divorce. They think if this agreement is no longer making two people happy, it should be terminated. Okay. Traditional conservatism, or more social conservatism, if you'll say that, the idea of marriage isn't that it's two people getting together because it makes them happier or gives them benefits. It's two people getting together so that they can have a child, or hopefully several children. And a traditional conservative is against no-fault divorce because breaking up the family unit is bad for children, and that's pretty self-evident by studies after studies. It's not good for children. So, in a social conservative worldview, the individual happiness of the mother and father is less important than the collective happiness of the family unit. And specifically, the responsibility of the parents to the kids matters a lot in a socially conservative worldview, whereas a more progressive liberal worldview, yes, that responsibility exists, but it is a lower responsibility. The general idea of progressive parenting, from what I can see, and if I'm wrong on this, by all means comment below, I, in general terms, try not to strawman the other side, because I think most people believe things in good faith. They might be wrong, in my perspective, but I think they believe what they believe in good faith. Some politicians almost never believe anything in good faith, but individual people probably do believe what they believe in good faith, and we should have a dialogue about that. But the general gist here of progressive parenting is the parents should support the kids' decisions, whereas a more conservative parenting is the parents should direct the kid. In other words, the conservative parent tells their young son, go play a sport. The son might not want to play a sport, might not say they want to play a sport, but the parent knows the son's probably going to be more happy playing a sport. They might bounce around to different sports, try them out, but in the end of the day, they'll probably pick a sport. Whereas the progressive parent, the son doesn't want to play a sport, they won't put their son in sports. Their son wants to do ballet, they'll put their son in ballet. There's pros and cons to both of these, but this really shows you the different perspectives on how this handles. And this is why things like having kids and marriage tend to make people more conservative. It's not a universal thing. There are people who are married with kids who are extremely progressive, socialists, communists even. In fact, you might be shocked to find out that in communist Russia, they had children too. Shocking. Not many, though, if you look at birth rates in the Eastern Bloc right now. Sure, it's not communist anymore, but there were birth rates weren't great even during communism. But anyways, what happens here and why these events might make you more conservative is you've gained responsibility. Most parents tend, in my experience, this is not based on polling, this is based on observation. This is an observational statement. Most parents seem to become more like the conservative parenting ideal as soon as they have kids. That is, they are more pushy to their kids I'm going to rephrase this. They act what they think is what they believe is their kid's best interest, as opposed to letting their kids decide what is their best interest and going from there. Most parents seem to act like the former. Similarly, most real marriages, because there's two types of marriages that actually happen. You have the serial divorcers who make up almost all divorces. And those aren't really real marriages. Those are people who fall into marriage because they moved in together, which was not a good idea. They get married because they think that's just showing that, oh, I really like you, so we get married. Or they are the kind of people who just can't live alone. So as soon as they leave one relationship, they immediately get another one. Those are the kind of people in what I'm going to call not really marriages. It's a marriage that has been entered by people who don't actually consider marriage a serious agreement. Then you have the other group of people who get into marriage who think it is a serious agreement and, in general, want to be in the marriage for the rest of their life and don't want to think about an exit at all. The second group of people get more conservative when they get married because now it's not just about what's best for you, it's about what's best for you and your spouse. You're thinking about more people, thinking about balancing things. Similarly, I think taxes and starting a business one are pretty self-explanatory. These aren't actually, the kids in marriage make you more socially conservative, not necessarily fiscally. Taxes and business will typically make you more fiscally conservative, but not necessarily socially. And I think that should be self-explanatory. Like, if you're paying taxes, you're more concerned about paying taxes. And if you run a business, you're more concerned about the rules and regulations of running a business. So you have more contact with the government, and you are more likely to want to do something about it. Whereas if you get a lot of transfers from the government and you don't pay a lot of taxes, you're likely going to be more supportive of those transfers because you are a rational human being, and if you are getting something, you want to keep getting something. Shocking. But, so I've just really hammered out here why this hypothesis is a more compelling one and an argument for why this should actually make sense. But there's a problem with this hypothesis. It's wrong. You might ask yourself, what? How is this hypothesis wrong? Well, it's wrong because it wildly oversimplifies things. I think on a person-to-person level, it's probably true. But the thing is, people oftentimes don't vote based on ideological agreement. I don't have it in a nice format, but there was relatively recently a Canadian election survey posted. It had 2021 federal election data in it. Bear with me one moment. I need to find it. Is it this one? No, that's the wrong one. It's this one. Oh no. Sorry, I just opened up a large Excel file by accident. Okay, here we go. Okay. That doesn't look nice. So we're going to put this here. So, is this what I want to be showing? No, bear with me. Okay, after a bit of a moment there, yes, that was a cut. I have found the right page and the right data. Sorry about that. So, what is this? So, I have created an index based off of a bunch of survey questions captured in this survey that I rank people based on how socially conservative they are, based on my aggregation. And you will see here, and this is their self-reported who they voted for. This has not been adjusted based off of any other criteria you might adjust a poll. So I've not adjusted for weighted based on region quotas, sex quotas, age quotas, whatever. I've not done any of that. There's no weighting. This is just raw responses. Other than the fact that I filtered it by this. You will see here, only 42% of people who self-identify, who respond as strongly socially conservative vote conservative. Another 10% vote People's Party. And 2% vote other. And actually, wait, I forgot. There is other people here. And then there's do not know. Apparently 13% of strongly socially conservative people do not know who they voted for in 2021. That's concerning. Anyways, the point I'm making out here is people don't vote for a party because that party is the most ideologically fitting to them. Sometimes that happens, but not always. Because again, we go on the other side of this. We have socially liberal people. 10% still voted conservative. And you can ignore strongly sock-lib here because the sampling yielded very few respondents in that category. It might possibly be my index is not great, which is why I've not really made any videos about this because I'm still tweaking stuff like that. But the quality of the index is not actually that important here. What's important here is these relative numbers as just an illustrative example based on real data. Okay? So, what does this tell us? Actually, I'll just leave that up for you guys. Well, people don't really just vote because of their worldviews. So it's very much probably true. This tweet here is probably true. The hypothesis I have is probably true, to be more specific, that these things, among others, I'm not saying this is the exhaustive list, make people more conservative. And depending on which item, might be social or fiscal. Rarely both. But becoming more conservative doesn't necessarily mean you will vote more conservative. So this is one piece of evidence why that is just not, or why the hypothesis that you get, that conservative parties get more, I'm going to rephrase this. The abstraction of the hypothesis that people get more conservative as they get older means that they will vote more conservative as they get older. The problem with this is not only do people who are more conservative in general not necessarily vote more conservative, as you can see, SOCON versus strongly SOCON is not a very large difference. The biggest one is mostly liberals and People's Party and do not knows, which is just insane to me, but anyways. So you have this, so becoming more conservative is not the one-to-one conversion to voting for right-wing parties as you might think. In fact, it's a very low conversion rate, actually. But what it is, misspoke. But what's more, though, is it's not just data like this. We have present data in Canada, though I don't have the data on hand for it, but Italy's recent polling data is also generally indicative of this, where the age brackets aren't more conservative. Sorry, the older age brackets aren't more conservative by expressed vote intention. So let's look at Canada for a second, because I do have the data, because obviously I run a model for Canada. And as those models, I collect demographics. So this is weighted, the calculated average by demographic group in Canada. Right now, I even just entered Nanos's poll today, which I'm not talking about because subscriber agreement. Grr. I really wanted to. I had to resist tweeting. So I will, in general, ignore the block here for a moment. So we're going to have left, right, and then we're going to have under 35s, just so you can see this. I'm ignoring the block because the block is too complicated to place. And I think a lot of people vote block because of other reasons than anything you could argue is based on conservatism or liberalism or anything else. I believe most people vote block because they are you ready for this? They're nationalists. Quebecois nationalists. Shocking. So, among under 35s, we'll start with right-wingers. We have 38.5% are right-wing. Voting right-wing right now by my forecasting. That is the Conservatives, People's Party, or other. The reason I'm calling other conservatives is you actually break down the parties that are other, they are all right of center, basically. Like, yes, there's communist parties and other fringe parties, but the ones that get most of the votes are the Christian Heritage Party and the Libertarian Party, and both of those are right of center, any meaningful sense of the term in Canada. On the other side of the fence, we have 57 voting left-wing. Okay, good start. Now we have 35 to 54s. What do we have here? Well, we have 44% voting right-wing. Nice, you might say. And we have 50% voting left-wing. Well, doesn't this support the hypothesis, right? They're older, they got more conservative. Okay. Then we have 55 plus. We have, of the right wings, 55 plus, we have 39. Oh. And of the left wing, we have, one second, I'm doing mental math here. I should have had these numbers set up, shouldn't I? Yeah. We have 51. So, as you can see here, as people got older, they did not get more conservative. They also did not get more liberal. Technically, they get more bloc. If you decide to classify based on economics or some key specific social issues like abortion, you could put the bloc in this, and then it makes this even worse, or even more stark of a trend, because then it's 61 here and 61 here. So there is no change, effectively. If you decide to call the bloc right wing, then it flattens out the other way, and then you see the right wingers gain with age, though they still peak in Middle Ages. But we're still ignoring the bloc here because I think they're too complicated to analyze on a 2D spectrum. Because I don't think people vote for them for this reason, for left-right reasons. So why? What could possibly be causing this kind of partisan gap based on age? Well, yes, I think my hypothesis here actually does apply in some regards, and why 35 to 54s might be more conservative than 55 pluses, because a lot of retirees have no responsibility, don't have a business, and don't pay taxes. And in fact, they probably get net transfers from the government. Okay, so they're probably less fiscally conservative because they don't feel like they're paying the bill for it. Fair enough. But I don't think that is the accurate picture here. And I also definitely don't think it's the accurate picture in Italy. What I think we are seeing here is a more underlying phenomenon. A more basic phenomenon. One that's so basic, people ignore it. People vote, in large part, for the party that gives them stuff. Now, I don't necessarily mean cash payments or transfers, but things they want. What do what do 35 to 54-year-olds in Canada want? They want, wait for it, especially when you're skewing towards the younger side of that spectrum, they want to be able to buy a house. Wow. They want a good job. Wow. What do 55 plus people want? They want a stable housing market because they are heavily invested in their housing. They want more old age support. They want a better healthcare system. But they want it to be a public healthcare system because the other underlying factor here, which I really should note, is while you might get conservative as you age, different groups, because of different moments in history, start at different levels of conservatism, you will say. I don't have the graph with me here, but actually give me one moment. I return, but with graph. So I can't 100% vouch for the exact data points in this graph. So the specific things might not be correct. And in fact, I think these generation boundaries are generally not the accepted ones, but in Canada at least. But the point of illustration here, what these dots represent is what the average age of the generation is. So the millennials here is 30 in the last election in Canada. At least the last one in this graph. This is how left of average they voted. So they pointed to 10 points left of the national average. Okay. What is the point here? Well, different generations, because of their specific circumstances, the specific things in their life, start at different points. You can see here the boomers started all the way down here, fairly centrist, but a little liberal. And now they've moved, and now they are centrist. They have gone more conservative, I would say, by the mechanism of my hypothesis. But the degree they move more conservative and the timing isn't always the same. As you can see here, the same span of time. These aren't, like, these are by age generation. So like obviously the Gen X graph should be offset. You don't see the same trend. If you offset the Gen X graph or the millennial graph or the silent generation graph, so it all overlaps the same time. In other words, it lines up election by election. I don't have that because I'm not that prepared. But you will quickly see here that the different generations move differently, which again is further proof that the general idea that as you age you get more conservative is false. It's in general true, but it's not a causative mechanism because different generations respond differently at different rates and at different times. Okay. So the general thing here is let's say in Canada, right? We're talking about the baby boomers. What did the baby boomers do? Like when they first started getting political power in Canada, again, we bring up this graph here. We're talking about 46 to 64s. When did they really start? Oh, let's not use baby boomers. Let's use silent generation. When did they really start getting power? That would be 60s, 70s. And the boomers would have been 70s, 80s. When you really start seeing them have influence. Boomers, again, actually probably more 80s, 90s for the boomers, and the silent generation, again, 60s, 70s, when they really start getting power. So what is the formative thing of both of these groups of people? The silent generation literally pushed for the current healthcare system in Canada. They created it. They're the people who voted in Trudeau Sr. and gave him the minority government there, and that forced the healthcare system. Was it Trudeau Sr. or was it Pearson? Regardless, it doesn't matter. It was in the 60s, 70s. So it's one of those two. Was it Pearson? Whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is, they were the people who voted in that minority government that caused the Canada Health Act to be created. And both these generations benefited from it when it was working the best. So they have an ideological and historical bias to that. So when we're talking about 2023 or forward, and we're talking about politics on this in Canada, where healthcare is a discussion issue, you would generally expect the people who have voted for this to start suddenly shifting left, which is why in a lot of polling, the oldest demographic, again, thank you, is shifting left wing. It's not that as they got older, they got more liberal. It's that the current discussion in politics is wanting to change one of the biggest things that happened in their political lifetimes. One of the things they probably campaigned for, strongly wanted. They likely benefited a lot from it during its time. So when that is a big discussion issue, the healthcare system, which is one of the big three issues in Canada, and the Conservatives are proposing radical change to it, and the older generations don't want that. They like the system. They just want to make it better. They don't want radical change. That pushes them away. You have this push-pull factor in groups of people. It's not just black and white. You're more conservative, you'll vote more conservative. People have pet issues. People have things they have done in their life that they don't want to see undone. And it's the exact opposite reason why you see progressively young people under 35s and 35 to 54s getting more conservative. This should be notable, by the way, because 2021, I don't have the data offhand, but this wasn't this close. Like 35s were under, I think we're close to 30% for right-leaning parties. Whereas, so Poilievre right now has effectively caused an 8-point gain there. These groups are moving right-wing, not necessarily because they are more conservative. In fact, I would hazard a guess, if you talk to the average under 35 in Canada right now, many of them would be less conservative on many things than the average 55 plus. Now, specific things, that isn't true, because there are other factors going on too, because again, this is really complicated, and one of the reasons why this video is relatively long. There's lots of factors that go into this. You can't just oversimplify. You can't make this a high level from above. You are this, so you vote that way. But in general, the younger demographic is more likely to vote conservative right now because the conservative parties, either the People's Party, the Conservative themselves, are are pushing policies to their benefit. If you are 25 and you don't have the money to build a house, or you don't have the money to buy a house, but you want a house, a party who is actively campaigning on making housing more affordable by increasing housing supply or decreasing demand is going to get you more interested and more willing to vote for them compared to a party like the Liberals, who have had 8 years to do something on the file and have utterly failed, or a party like the NDP who doesn't really seem to be focusing on it. You could argue within their platforms, I always talk about it, but doesn't seem to be what sings priority is. Whereas Poly's priority is very clearly housing and cost of living, Singh is a bit more over the place. It's harder to place him. He's kind of hitting those, kind of hitting other things. He's not laser focused. The laser focus gets results in this regard. But again, even this is a bit reductive. It's not just issues. It's not just when they were born. The climate of when they were growing up, not when they were born. It's not just events in your life make you more conservative as you age. There is a qualitative difference in commentary too, in ideas. If you grew up pre-internet, it was very difficult, especially in Canada, to find a lot of mainstream is the wrong word, a lot of conservative talking points. The conservative argument for things. Yes, your news stations or your news broadcasts might have those. You have your political parties who were arguing them. They existed. But it's not the same. You look at 2023, the internet age, the time when someone with a microphone and a computer can just make a YouTube channel and talk about things and people watch it and listen to them, listen to their ideas, listen to their theories. That wasn't a thing 30 years ago. Or when like the 55 plus demo were growing up. And what this causes is there's more cultural osmosis to right-wing discussion points now, whereas when they were young. Because one of the big factors that sets people's worldview is their core values generally lock in their late teens, early 20s, when your brain is the most elastic and developing. People can change their beliefs later on in life. But the older you are, the harder it is to change your beliefs. Because you're kind of locked in. You have your ideas in place. Many people, and I would say it is generally a good thing to do this, make sure to constantly test their ideas with their friends, with random strangers. One good place the internet is for, if you can actually find a healthy forum for debate on it, to constantly expose themselves to different ideas and to think on it. So they don't get settled down in their ways and they don't get stuck doing something just because they've been doing it for a while. But the general trend is, when you first learn about something, your brain is more open, and then once you feel like you know about something, your brain generally closes off. You're less interested in it. A very painfully obvious example, which hopefully most of my viewers will have done, is the first time you drive a car, it's really scary. It's really noticeable. It's a lot of work. You notice you're tired. Oh man, my leg's really tired from hitting the clutch all the time. Oh, darn. The 5,000th time you've driven your car, you barely even recognize that you're shifting the gear. Right? The steering wheel takes effort to move. In fact, many people often forget they are driving. That's not very safe. You shouldn't do that. But that happens. And it's because as you do something more and more and more, you less examine it because you rely more on muscle memory and innate action than you are cerebral thinking. This happens with politics too, unless you actively try to challenge yourself. Which is why I will always suggest that you listen to as many people as you want to listen to. Or as many content creators, or look at other pollsters or whatever. Look at other people. Don't just look at me. They'll definitely keep coming back. But what this does is it means that if you aren't exposed to these ideas when you're young, it can be very difficult to adopt them as you get older. There is the intrinsic thing in modern day that left-wingers are using this because they are pushing to have things like derivatives of gender theory taught in schools of various flavors. So basically, the advanced sex education kind of stuff. The reason they want to do that, you could say many reasons, you could say many intentions, but the general gist is they believe that if you acclimate someone to the various LGBTQ whatever, what the acronym is these days, groups and their lifestyles, when they're young, they'll be more accepting of them as they get older. I would, generally speaking, argue that that seems to be correct. If you look at the support among the LGBTQ among Zoomers versus Boomers, Boomers generally are more apprehensive of them than Zoomers because Zoomers have been exposed in schools a lot of the time to them, to the idea of it. And this is why there's a qualitative difference between Zoomers in Canada and Boomers in Canada, or any other pair of groups, on things such as conservatism. And there's one area where it's very, very clear. Abortion. The least pro-life demographic are 55 plus. The most pro-life demographic is under 35. Why is that? Well, the under 35s actually had the ability to hear the debate and hear the arguments on both sides because of the internet. In Canada, abortion was effectively legalized by Supreme Court decision, and then there was no debate on it. Not really. There has sort of been a debate going on in the US, though not really. Though there's probably actually going to be more debate now going forward now that Roe is struck down. But the key thing here is when you were growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, there really wasn't public debate about it. There wasn't people arguing pro-life arguments or pro-choice arguments. There was really no arguments being made. And then the decision was crafted down from the Supreme Court. People didn't really care. So they were like, whatever. It is what it is. I'll amend that. There was pro-choice arguments being made. There wasn't really pro-life ones being made, though. You get flash forward to now, and there is a huge market on YouTube, Twitter, whatever, of people arguing pro-life positions, especially leading up to Roe being overturned. A lot of this is coming from the US, to be honest, but Canada too. And this changes the view of a growing generation. Now, I would argue among under 35s, social conservatives are not extremely common, but I would argue the hardcore under 35 conservatives are probably more conservative than any other group in Canada. In like the classical sense of conservatism. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that under 35 conservatives are probably whereas under 35s in general are the most supportive of the LGBTQ, I would say in general under 35 conservatives are the least supportive of them. I can't prove that with polls, but even if I could, it's actually not that relevant. Because the point I'm making here isn't about the worldviews of the under 35s in Canada. These are just illustrative examples to explain the point. What I'm trying to get at here is people's worldviews are often set when they're young. They can change through big life events. And those big life events can make them more conservative. And their specific voting preferences can be heavily induced by political arguments, because most people only vote for a couple issues. They don't look at the entire platform and decide, like, bring up a spreadsheet and decide, oh, this is the most right-wing platform, I'm voting for it. People don't. In fact, I might even categorically say no one does that. At least not a statistically relevant amount of people do that. Almost everyone has a few pet issues that they vote based on. So, what we see here is the trend of people getting more conservative as they age. It is a trend that exists, and you can look at it and you can see it. But it is a vast oversimplification. Like many things in punditry and politics, it is a wild oversimplification. Why people vote for who they vote for is extremely complicated. Polls really oversimplify it. Pundits really oversimplify it. Politicians really oversimplify it. People are complex and, frankly, oftentimes actually not very rational decision makers. Though the catch-22 is you have to treat people like rational decision makers to win their vote. I would argue almost zero people are rational decision makers, but if you treat people as irrational, they won't vote for you. That can be a video for another time if you want that, but this is already getting a bit long, but whatever. So the gist here is maybe we can say people tend to sort of get more conservative as they age, but there's so many factors in it, and every generation starts at different points in how conservative they are. And even among a generation, if we look at Zoomers, or under 35s if we want to be more broad, there is qualitative differences between the demos. You can have, in Canada, we have the under 35s who effectively watch or listen to some or many right-wing commentators, and you have those who don't. And these two groups of people are very different politically. Like extremely so. In fact, I would say possibly more different than you have for 55 plus demographic, which is one of the reasons why polls tend to have under 35s as a chaotic mess. Every single poll from the same company can have a wildly different result, especially if you're looking at rolling polls like Nanos or other live caller polls, because they get actually random sample size. The online polls do a really bad disservice on this regard. They don't get this randomness, or they don't really capture this bounciness, because the reason this is bouncy is it's less homogenous. Under 35s are a very heterogeneous group politically, whereas in Canada, 55 plus are very homogeneous. Comparatively. They're obviously not the same person, but they're more similar amongst itself than under 35s are similar amongst themselves. So we do have this sort of trend, but it's barely a trend. It's not causative. And it's frankly, I don't think even that useful, notable, or interesting. It's the classic example of, I think a lot of pundits just speak hot air. They try to sound smart. They try to impress people they are listening to make them seem more interesting or more worth listening to. When in fact, most of them don't know what they're talking about. In fact, you might even argue, I don't know what I'm talking about. And if you do, comment below. Tell me where you think I'm wrong. I love that. It's fantastic. But this industry, political commentating, polling, has an expert problem. People think they're experts because they've done this for a while, but that doesn't mean you're an expert. Expertise has nothing, well, okay, not nothing, has little to do with how long you've been doing something. I could do this for 20 years and not get any better at it. How you get better at something like this is you have to make predictions, see the result, and figure out why you were wrong. If you get it right, you're not actually going to get better. It's only when you were wrong that you get better. But you have to critically analyze and look at it. And that means you need to have a lot of data points. If you just have an election every 4 years, you will never, ever, ever become an expert at this. At punditry, at commentary, at political forecasting. You have to do as many as you can. You have to make as many predictions as you can. And you have to critically analyze why you were wrong. And most people in this industry don't do that. I won't say I'm an expert. I will never say that. But I have I have a weird set of things very specific set of things I'm interested in, and they all overlap a lot. So I read a lot about this. I look into a lot about this. I read a lot of polls. I talk to a actually quite diverse group of people, politically speaking. So I think the insight I have has merit. Though if you don't like it, I mean, by all means, comment below. Tell me what you think I'm wrong. But with that, this is long enough now. Apparently I've smashed out an hour here. If you don't like these long videos, by the way, let me know below. But with that, I bid you adieu. If you liked the video, press the like button, share to your friends, comment on all the things. If you guys commented every single time I ask you to comment in the video, my videos would have so many comments. It'd be great. Though then again, I might look really dumb because then I'd have like 500 comments and like 100 views. But anyways, it'd be great. Actually, probably would induce more views. But anyways, I hope to see everybody again on Sunday. I want to do a Canadian political update, but I need more polls. I can't just go on Nanos polls. It wouldn't be proper. But if I don't get polls for that, I do have a backup project, so there will be a video on Sunday regardless. It just might not be Canada. Well, it will be Canada, but it might not. You'll see. But with that, once again, I bid you all adieu, and I will see you Sunday.